School textbooks often explain World War I as a tragic chain reaction that began with the assassination of an Archduke in Sarajevo and spiraled out of control through alliances and misunderstandings. But this version hides the deeper forces that were already pulling the world toward war long before the first gunshot echoed across Europe. To understand why millions of soldiers died in trenches, why entire empires collapsed, and why the Middle East remains unstable even today, we must step away from battlefields and speeches and instead look at the world as it existed around 1900, when the greatest fear of the British Empire was not an invading army or a rival navy, but a railway quietly being planned far from London. This railway was called the Berlin-Baghdad Railway, and while it appeared to be a simple development project, it threatened to undermine the very system that allowed Britain to dominate global trade and politics. At the dawn of the 20th century, Britain stood at the center of the world order, and its power rested on two unshakable foundations: the Royal Navy and control of the Suez Canal, the narrow passage through Egypt that connected Europe to India, Britain's most valuable colony. Control of the seas meant control of trade, because almost all commerce between Europe and Asia had to pass through British-patrolled waters, giving London enormous leverage over rivals who depended on global markets. Any country that wished to sell goods overseas had little choice but to accept British inspections, tariffs, and rules, which allowed Britain to maintain economic dominance without constant warfare. Germany, however, was growing restless within this system because after unifying in 1871, it had rapidly transformed into an industrial powerhouse, producing more steel, chemicals, and machinery than Britain, and leading the world in science and engineering. Despite this success, Germany faced serious limits because it lacked colonies rich in raw materials, it lacked overseas markets it could freely access, and most importantly, it lacked a navy capable of challenging Britain's control of the oceans. German industry depended on exports and imported resources, and as long as Britain ruled the seas, Germany's future growth remained vulnerable to blockade and pressure. To the southeast lay the Ottoman Empire, once a vast and powerful state that had ruled lands across Europe, Asia, and Africa, but by the late 19th century it had weakened badly due to nationalist revolts, outdated institutions, and repeated military defeats. The greatest blow came not from war, but from debt, because years of borrowing from European banks had left the empire financially broken, and in 1881, foreign creditors took direct control of Ottoman revenues through the Public Debt Administration, collecting taxes on common goods like salt, tobacco, and stamps, and sending the money straight to London and Paris. This arrangement stripped the Ottoman government of real economic sovereignty and turned a once proud empire into a dependent state struggling to survive. Sultan Abdul Hamid II understood that modernization was essential if the empire were to endure, because railways could move troops quickly, connect distant provinces, and strengthen central authority. Yet relying on British or French companies would only deepen foreign control. Germany offered a different path, one that promised modernization without immediate political domination, and at the same time served German ambitions perfectly. Kaiser Wilhelm II saw the chance to break free from British maritime control by building a continuous overland railway linking Berlin to Baghdad, running through Austria-Hungary, the Balkans, Constantinople, and deep into Mesopotamia, creating a trade route that bypassed the seas entirely. Such a railway would allow German goods to reach Asian markets without British interference, while granting Germany access to the Middle East's vast natural resources, including oil, which was rapidly becoming the most important fuel of modern warfare and industry. German banks financed the project, German engineers carved tunnels through mountains and laid tracks across deserts, and mile by mile the railway moved eastward, turning a bold idea into a growing reality.
In Britain, officials watched this progress with mounting concern because they understood that a completed railway could threaten the Suez Canal, undermine British trade dominance, and place future energy supplies beyond their control at a time when Britain itself had almost no domestic oil. Oil-powered ships were faster and more efficient than coal-powered ones, and Britain's navy was beginning to rely on foreign oil sources, making control over supply routes a matter of national survival. The Berlin-Baghdad Railway pointed directly toward oil-rich regions in Mesopotamia, and Germany had secured rights to land along the railway, giving it influence over resources that would define future wars. Britain decided this outcome was unacceptable and moved to block the project using indirect methods, applying diplomatic pressure on Gulf rulers to deny Germany access to ports, discouraging international investors from supporting the railway, and shaping public opinion through newspapers that framed the project as a dangerous act of aggression rather than economic development. Despite these efforts, construction continued, and by 1914, the railway was close enough to completion to turn British anxiety into urgency. When war finally broke out, it was not simply the result of nationalist pride or diplomatic mistakes, but the climax of a long struggle over trade routes, energy resources, and global power. Britain moved quickly to secure Mesopotamia under the pretext of protecting oil facilities, while the Ottomans, hoping for German victory and freedom from debt, joined the Central Powers, unaware of how ruthlessly Britain would defend its imperial interests. The Middle Eastern front became brutal and chaotic, with extreme heat, disease, and supply failures destroying armies, and the incomplete railway left Ottoman forces struggling to transport equipment across mountains and deserts, a weakness that may have altered the balance had the line been finished earlier. As the war dragged on, Britain and France secretly planned the division of Ottoman lands, drawing artificial borders that ignored local realities and ensured long-term control over oil, ports, and transport routes, while promises of independence made to Arab allies were quietly abandoned. When the war ended, the Ottoman Empire was dismantled, its ruler exiled, its debts redistributed, and its railway broken into disconnected fragments across hostile borders, while Britain emerged with its empire intact and oil firmly established as the fuel of the modern world. Yet the logic behind the railway never disappeared, reappearing in later German ambitions, Cold War strategies, and modern projects that seek to connect continents beyond naval control, reminding us that infrastructure is never neutral and that railways carry power within their steel, shaping conflicts long after the trains stop running, and revealing that the true causes of great wars are often found not in dramatic assassinations, but in quiet lines of iron advancing across contested land.